Sherrod Blakely, NBC Boston, covers the Celtics. They're in town tonight. And no Kyrie, Sherrod. It kind of, I guess, is a little disappointing to not have him out there because this was really a litmus test type of game for Philly, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the way that they're playing right now, the additions that they've made, not only to that starting unit but also to the bench, clearly for them to have the kind of season that they certainly believe they're capable of, this was one of those games where come April, May, you look back and say, that was kind of the beginning of when they really started to, I think, kind of exercise some of those demons, because you guys know as well as I do, the Celtics have had their number for a number of years, and now this is as good as we've seen this Sixers team be able to put on the floor to not only compete but beat the Celtics.
Yeah, and let me ask your opinion on, after the trade deadline, how Boston maybe perceives Philly.
Well, even before the trades, I mean, there was a lot of respect there. I mean, they think the world of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid as players and what they mean to the game and what they can do on the floor. But since then, I mean, they're just better. I mean, there's no getting around that. Tobias Harris is exactly what they needed. He gives them a guy that can really play the floor, play the three, can shoot the ball better than 40% three-point shooter. And it's not like this was a fluke season for him. He's been doing that the last couple of years. Great in pick-and-roll situations, and you just think about him and Ben Simmons. The potential for them to be the last team standing was just enhanced tremendously. And the Celtics, they know that for them, their best shot is to be candid, guys like Gordon Hayward and Jaylen Brown to really elevate their play down the latter stages of the regular season and into the playoffs. But then you got a good matchup. But right now, I think the Sixers have every reason to believe that they're the better team.
What's the vibe around this team coming into Philly tonight for a big game? This is a new-look Sixers, as we're discussing right now. Different team, 2 in a row. They're trending upwards. And in Boston, I kind of want your opinion here on what's gone wrong, and is it overblown with the national media? How much of a quote-unquote disarray this team is in? Is it about right? Like, what's the vibe around this team, and how are they feeling coming into the game tonight?
Well, I think talent-wise, they still feel they have enough to come out of the East, but there is a greater element of uncertainty and I would say instability with this team, and particularly within that locker room. You guys have heard, the comments that Marcus Morris made a couple of nights ago, but for me, the most disturbing and concerning comments came when he said that even when they were winning, and they've done a good bit of that of late, there was still this sense that something wasn't right, that they weren't having fun, that they weren't as together as you would want to be. And he made it very clear that when you talk about teams that win championships and go deep into the playoffs, it's clear and undeniable that they're enjoying the process. And, just talking with Brett Brown yesterday, we're just talking about the acclimation process with his guys. I asked him about that. He talked about guys being excited for one another and joyful. It was almost as if everything that Marcus Morris said, Brett Brown was giving you, this is the other side of that coin, the side that you want to be on. And so I think for the Celtics, this is one of those games where, they're not expected to win. They shouldn't be expected to win. And if they find a way to come out successful, it could be one of those season-changing type moments for them. And if you're the Sixers, you have every reason in the world to believe that you should win this game based upon the way you're playing now, the way your roster constructed, and frankly, just the ebb and flow of the NBA season. It's very clear that you guys are riding a nice high wave right now, while the Celtics, they're kind of in a bit of an ebb of sorts.
If you have to place blame on someone, I know that's tough, but if you had to place blame on what's going on with the Celtics and what's stemming from those comments that Morris made, who would you put that quote-unquote blame on right now?
I'd probably put it on the man who put this team together, Danny Ainge. I think you have to have a pulse for your locker room and team, and since when the change is needed and required. And I'm not saying they're necessarily there yet, but if, in fact, we get to the playoffs and the Celtics are bounced in the first round, there's going to be a lot of candidates to get a piece of that blame pie. But I start with the man who put this team together, because he had every opportunity at the trade deadline to do something. There weren't any deals that he felt made the team better or made sense for them, long or short term. I get that. But that being said, you've got to figure out if this is the team that you are going to rock with, you need to figure out how to make them play and roll together. And clearly there is a disconnect of sorts between different factions within that locker room. And, you know, again, winning typically is what solves those type of problems. But as Marcus Morris pointed out, even when they've won consistently, there's been an issue within that locker room. And I just don't see that getting fixed anytime soon. I mean, this season may go down as a big disappointment for the Celtics if they don't somehow find a way to get to the conference finals, which is a lot harder now based upon the moves that Philly has made and Toronto.
Sherrod Blakely, NBC Boston, covers the Celtics. They're in town tonight. How much of this is on the coach? I mean, the guy who could do no wrong.
Yeah.
He's the boy genius. But I got to ask that question because it seems that a lot of people think his X's and O's are great, but managing these personalities, maybe not so good.
Right, and this has been the greatest challenge that he's had ever in terms of managing egos and personalities. Because remember, Brad Stevens, to me, he's a mastermind with leftovers, guys that other teams didn't really feel that crazy about and thrown together, and he can make it a great meal out of that and get the team further than their talent would suggest. But this was the first year where there were not only expectations for the players, but also for Brad Stevens. And I just don't think he's met that standard. I don't think he's had a great year coaching, because one of the things that we talk a lot about with him is the ability to get the most out of guys and make the team better with his presence and impact and those type of things. Has not happened. And a lot of it is what you alluded to. I think the fact that you've got some attitudes and egos that I think are a little bit stronger than he's accustomed to. And I go back to what happened last year in the playoffs. To me, Jaylen Brown, Tatum, Rozier, they got a taste of the forbidden fruit of success. Guys that young are not supposed to play at the level that they did in the playoffs and go as deep as they did relative to their experience and the role that they had up to that point in the season. So once you bring back a Gordon Hayward, once you bring back a Kyrie Irving, those guys are not going to be in the same roles that they found success with. Getting young guys to understand that is damn near impossible. You know, Doc Rivers, I talked to him about this a couple of days ago, and you know, he said, you know, young guys and roles, they don't match, because young guys, they don't have the experience and wisdom to understand winning is what is going to get you far and keep you in the league. They're still trying to establish who they are as players. And to ask guys to focus more on winning and not as much on their own individual and personal development, again, it sounds good, but I just don't think it's something that just comes naturally to young guys, particularly young guys who have had a taste of success at the highest level, which in the NBA is in the playoffs.
Sherrod Blakely, NBC Boston. What about Jayson Tatum? What is, how will you see him every night? A lot of people thought this guy's going to be an all-star, a superstar. He's the real deal. And I think a lot of that was based on what they saw from him in the playoffs, not having Kyrie around and being the guy who had the freedom to do whatever he wanted. How would you describe his game this year on a nightly basis when you get to see him all the time? Has he plateaued a little bit? Has he regressed? Is he playing really well and we just don't know it because we don't see him all the time?
I would describe it as flatlined. And by that, I simply mean it hasn't gotten better. It hasn't gotten worse. It's just stayed where it was. And that's not what anyone expected to happen this year. You would think that playoff experience would have kind of elevated his game to another level, and it just hasn't. Jayson Tatum is not having a bad season by any stretch of the imagination. You look at guys from his draft class, and he's still one of the better scorers. And by better, I mean like one of the top 2-3 scorers from his class. But that being said, he has not elevated his game to where you can even consider or contemplate him as an all-star caliber player. And that has been part of just what I think has been a team-wide just issue for them. Guys just not really elevating their play to the standards that certainly many, including themselves, have had. And with Tatum in particular, it's been interesting because he's the one guy of those young guys who's getting the same opportunities. Actually, he's getting more opportunities now than he did a year ago. And I just don't think he has figured out how to best utilize those opportunities and make the most of them. I will say that once the Anthony Davis rumors got out there, his play was solid. And he became an actually more efficient scorer and things of that nature. But, again, this was a guy that a lot of people saw as being an all-star this year, myself included. And that ability, that dominance that we saw in the playoffs a year ago, it just hasn't manifested itself with any kind of consistency.
How much of a difference have you noticed between when Kyrie is playing and when he's not playing with guys like Brown and Tatum, both on the floor and off?
The biggest difference when Kyrie is out is the ball movement. It seems like they have this understanding, and it makes sense, that they need each other more when he's out than they do when he's in, because he's such a dominant player, such a dominant scorer, breaks ankles left and right all night long. He's almost like he's like a calming blanket. I mean, he's just there, and you know he's going to make something happen. And when he's not there, you need one another. And I think it's hurt the Celtics at times this year, because when he hasn't been there, I think that they haven't been as aggressive or as assertive individually when they've had certain matchups or certain situations that would benefit the team. They've been a little bit too passive in those moments, in those times. And again, I think that they've had times where they've figured it out, but it's tough. I mean, because as you guys know, I mean, Kyrie is a hell of a player. Can pretty much get to where he wants to when he wants to. And when you have that ability, your teammates from time to time can do a little bit of Kyrie watching, which they've acknowledged that they've done at times. That's not what championship basketball is about. That's one of the reasons why they are kind of in this malaise of sorts as far as good but not great in the Eastern Conference. And, you know, they still got time to figure it out. But, I mean, it's just not looking all that great and optimistic based upon the way they've been playing of late.
We'll get you out on this. Gordon Hayward, do you have any feel that he is going to elevate, come around at any point, or is this the player that he is likely to be for, the foreseeable future?
You know what? When the season began, before he actually got out there, and I talked to a lot of different people, guys who've had, his specific injury, but injuries that kept you a amount of time. And they said the latter stages of the season would be as early as you can realistically expect to see him playing the way he did before the injury. And so for me, my timeline was February, March was when I would really start to really hone in and just get a feel for whether he is that guy or not. And I got to be honest with you, he's still very up and down, inconsistent. I think he is getting better as time goes on, but he's not making the kind of quantum leaps that I think a lot of people expected from a guy who was just an all-star just a couple years ago. His growth is going to be instrumental for them getting a deep playoff run, because if he plays the way he is now in the playoffs, they won't last long.
By the way, I'd be remiss to ask, I mean, how much of their future championship possibilities lie on Danny Ainge being able to figure out a way to get Anthony Davis to come to Boston?
Well, look, if they can get AD to Boston, that is a seismic game changer. They go from being one of the 100 to the team everyone is trying to beat. Because if you put Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, and let's say you keep a Jaylen Brown, which I don't think you'll be able to, but let's say you can, and you add a couple other pieces here and there, you're going to be the last team standing. As great as the moves that Philadelphia's made, and Embiid is a phenomenal talent, I'll take Anthony Davis over Embiid. And that's again, both very talented players. But Embiid is the best player on the floor pretty much every night he's on the floor, except when he's playing against Anthony Davis. That's just, and again, no disrespect to Joel, but Anthony Davis is that damn good. I think Boston becomes the team. They become the team to beat if they get Anthony Davis. But that's a big if, because even though they'll have a lot of assets to throw that way, that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to move the needle in the eyes of the Pelicans. And then you've got to also run the risk of him not re-signing once his contract lapses going into the summer of 2020. So there's a lot of, gamesmanship that the Celtics are certainly going to be engaged with between now and next season, when obviously they will ideally like to have Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving in Celtics uniforms.
Sherrod Blakely, Celtics, Sixers, 8 o'clock right here. 97.3 ESPN has it, and we'll bring it to you tonight. Sherrod, always a pleasure, pal.
Okay, take care, guys.